Morning, everyone. Thank you for those of you that have been prompt. I'm just going to give it another minute or so for a few people to join, and then we'll get ourselves started. Okay, right. I think we'll get started now. It's just after 11. So welcome everyone to the first of two webinars I'm running under the Hammersmith and Fulham Fit to Bid Business Support Programme. It's a programme basically designed to help all you local businesses essentially improve your bidding and tendering skills, with the idea being you'll then have a greater chance of winning more contracts, greater share of contracts, both with the council and with the private sector. It's an interactive session, so do participate. I'm a firm believer that the more you put into things, the more you get out. So do get involved in the exercises. And also, I'm of an age where I like to write things down because it tends to stick in my mind. So I would encourage you to make your own notes and commit to do something as a result of what you hear in the next hour or so. So commit to take some action to move your business forward so that you know there's an actual outcome as a result of what you've heard today. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat. I'll either answer them as we go through or I'll pick them up at the end, and we'll get ourselves started now. Okay, so just a little bit about me and my background. I'm the program manager for the contract that Brandyw, the company I work with, are running on behalf of the council. My background is banking for my sins, 30 years with Lloyds, everything from looking at startups through to larger international banks, but also spent 4 years running the government team for Lloyds, where I was involved in a lot of public sector, both local authority and central government tendering. So that's where my experience comes from in terms of tendering. I'm basically an advisor with Brandyw, and we run a number of these programs for chambers of commerce, for local councils, and I've been involved in a number of the different programs, as you can see on the screen. And I also run a small social care business looking after small people, which is good for my heart, with this being my intellectual stimulation. So that's 40 years of my background summarized into about a minute. So I must have been having fun, I guess. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. These sessions, they are interactive, as it says. Today's an introduction to the bidding process, and then we'll run another session, same time, same place, next week, where I'll talk about improving your bid responses. And as it says on the screen, it's all about the principles of best practice and excelling in selling. So a lot of businesses who haven't tendered treat the exercise as an administrative exercise. And let me tell you, if you look at it on that basis, you're more likely to fail. You're always going to be selling yourself and selling your business. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're looking to bid for contracts. What we're going to cover both today and in the session next week, we're going to look at the elements, the key elements that make up what I would call a winning bid. So we'll look at things like why organisations go out to tender, what sort of things councils and larger organisations are looking for. We'll look at the basics, which you have to get right to get past the first stage. And then we'll look at what are the elements that make up this winning bid, supported by what I like to call the golden rules. So we'll spend some time looking at understanding the questions, being clear about objectives, how you confirm and articulate your own solutions and selling points, how you ensure you demonstrate the benefits of your solution and how you add value. And a key point, providing evidence to what you say. All well and good saying all these wonderful things about yourself and your company, but how do you back it up? And what sources of research can you find to help you understand better the client and what they want? And putting all that together, how you can then write a clear, compelling, accurate, and concise bid response. So there are a number of different elements that we'll be covering this week and next. So just a little bit about Brandrian, the organisation that I work for. As I said, we're a leading group of business advisors in London and the South East, and we work with local governments, chambers of commerce, growth hubs, running various different programs like this to support businesses. They can be startup, they could be more established, could be growing. We're a group of, I suppose, 15 or 20 specialist advisors. But the thing about us, which we think is unique, is that we all run our own businesses as well. So we've got technical as well as practical experience. And in the bottom of the screen, you can see there are a number of proprietary programs we run, Fit to Bid being one. We run a Women in Business program. I won't go through them all. A peer network program to help businesses share ideas, share expertise. So basically, whatever stage your business is at, generally, we're in a position to hopefully help you. Right, so let's just talk a little bit about the program. And essentially, this is the cycle of what we do. We'll talk to you about how to engage with procurement departments, because as a number of you may well know, when you're dealing with councils in particular, or larger private sector organizations, you'll often be dealing with the procurement department, i.e. a team of evaluators, a team of buyers who are procuring the service on behalf of the end user. We also have an online bid capability assessment questionnaire. If you haven't done that, I would encourage you to do so. It takes about 5 minutes. And on the basis of the questions that you respond to, we'll share with your report as to your state of preparedness for bidding. Of course, the program will help you in terms of improving your bidding skills, and I'll cover that obviously much more as we go through. And like I said at the outset, it's very much a sales process. You're either selling your solutions, you're selling your business, you're selling yourself, and you're selling your sort of innovative mindset. So we'll talk to you about the sales process. And then finally, there are individual one-to-one tender advice sessions which are covered by the council. And I'll touch upon those in a moment. The program is actually coming towards a conclusion at the end of this month, but every business who hasn't had a one-to-one on this session today, please, and my details are at the end, get in touch and we can arrange a one-to-one session specifically for you and your business. There's a lot of support available to you as a business under the program. So take advantage of it while it lasts, because it's on its last legs, so to speak. There are a number of benefits. Just to quickly run through those, we'll give you a detailed assessment of your bid writing skills. I'll share with you knowledge and skills to help implement best practice based on what we've seen with other businesses we've talked to, with other tenders we've worked on. It says there on the third bullet point, you get access to 2 confidential advice sessions. With the program running now, there's 1 session that's available to all new businesses that have not taken advantage of that yet. We'll help you in terms of submitting what's called an expression of interest. It's where basically you look to show a council, a private sector organisation, that you want to bid for a certain bit of business, for a certain contract. We'll of course help you with writing and submitting, hopefully winning bids. And also take a wider look at your business using a business model canvas technique, which is a very succinct 1-page way of assessing you and your business, both from internal and external factors. We'll look at your value proposition. If you haven't heard of that, what value do you actually provide to the organisation? And although the program is coming towards its conclusion, we'll engage with you throughout the remainder of the program if there are things that you want to discuss and provide you with regular and ongoing feedback. So there's a lot of good stuff out there for you as a local business to take advantage of. So please do so. Right, so first question. That's a sort of a picture that you probably recognise. It's a sort of civic campus at King Street. And essentially the question is, would you bid for that? Just think about that for 10 seconds. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that there's no reason, even as a smaller business, that you shouldn't consider getting involved with these larger contracts, providing you've taken the right steps to get there. You may not be able to do it on your own as a sole supplier. You may need to collaborate. You may need to join forces, but there's no reason why, with the right preparation and planning, and we'll talk about that, you shouldn't be thoughtful about getting involved with these bigger contracts. So don't be put off by the fact that these things are, perhaps feel like they're outside your scope. You can certainly get involved in these larger contracts, and the council particularly want to encourage local businesses to do that. Okay, first bit of work for you guys to do, and it's very simple, nothing too taxing. Just share with me, if you would, in the chat facility, what experience you've had of bidding and tendering, just so I can get a flavour of your knowledge. So if you've never tendered before, just put a 1 in the box. If you've maybe completed a small number, it's a 2. And then if you are a business that regularly submits tenders and bids, then it's a 3. So if you could just populate something in the chat there, and if it is a 2 or 3, just put next to it how successful you've been. Great, you win lots of tenders, you win a few, or perhaps you don't win any. So I'm just going to have a quick look at what's going on in the chat, because it's actually going up quite nicely, so that's good. So 1, 1, 1, 2, good, okay, 2, mostly okay, that's great. That's great, that's good. I'll just give you a second more. So we've got a combination of experience, some with very limited experience, some with good experience. So that's good. I'll just give you 10 more seconds for that. That just helps me understand where your knowledge is. Okay, thanks for getting involved with that. The system works. So the next thing I want you to think about for a moment or two is why organizations go to tender. It takes a huge amount of time and effort on all sides. I'm very honest and straight talking, as you'll work out. So it does take time and effort, both for you as suppliers and also for the client, for the council, for the private sector organization. So why do they go out to tender? And what do you think sort of things they're looking for in a provider? So again, try and put yourself in the mind of the buyer. I'll be emphasizing that point quite a lot, because if you can try and write your bid from almost their perspective, empathize with what their challenges are, you're going to be writing much stronger bids. So again, I'm going to give you about a minute or so to, again, pop something in the chat in terms of why do you think organizations go out to tender, and what do you think they look for in a provider? So again, don't be shy, pop something in the chat. There are no right or wrong answers. Well, there are some right answers. Just get involved and tell me why you think they go out to tender, and I'll then share some of my experiences. We're off and running. Thank you. Yep, they want to get additional value. Yep, absolutely. Build strong partnerships. Absolutely. Inclusivity. Yep. I think the value one is a big one, and we'll talk about that. All the other points are additionally valid, of course. Anyone else got something to pop in before I share some of the answers? I've got to get you thinking first before I share the answers. Okay, thanks for getting involved. So let's go through some of the reasons and why companies actually do go out to tender. First of all, they want to get a fair and objective comparison. What's out there in the market, especially with local authorities. It's a consistent process. They ask the same questions to every supplier. Certainly with some contracts, particularly in the local authority market, they have to go out to tender if they're a certain size. They want to minimize supplier selection risk. So by asking the same questions, by having a structured, agreed process, which is fair, objective, and open, they should, if the process works, get the best supplier. That's the idea behind it. They need to ensure compliance, particularly councils, local authorities, with certain legislation, certain policies, terms and conditions. They may have social value policies. I'll talk more about that in a moment. They clearly want to achieve a sustainably competitive price. And there's a clear difference between that and lowest price. Often suppliers think lowest price wins, but that's absolutely not the case. They're looking for value. They're looking for a return on investment. They're looking what they're getting for their money. And also, they're looking at what sort of efficiencies, what sort of improved processes you as a supplier may be able to bring to their internal systems and processes. And if they're measurable, so much the better. And all these factors, all these things that we're talking about here, they all form part of the evaluation process, which we'll talk more about in a moment. So how are you saving them time? How are you saving them money? Can you measure it? Can you demonstrate that there'll be a benefit from your solution? So there are a number of reasons. And there are a number of other factors to consider to help you try and get into their mindset. Do you, as an organization, have an innovative mindset? Do you come up with new ideas? Can you drive higher value through their organization? Just to clarify, all this feedback that I'm sharing with you here today comes from real contract evaluators, either private or public sector. So it's not sort of theoretical. This is exactly what clients, larger clients, are saying they want from their suppliers. They want you to be able to demonstrate you can actually carry out the work. What's your level of competence? How can you prove that? How well do you communicate? Are you a collaborative type of organization? Can you demonstrate a way of improving their services? And they want to find partners that fit with their thinking. We all know that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And if they have similar mindsets, if a similar thought process, similar values, cultural fit, that accounts for quite a lot. You need to be able to provide reliable management information, preferably real-time information. All that helps. Future-focused expertise. What I mean by that is, if you're responding to a tender, don't just think about what they're asking for perhaps now. That's clearly a factor. But what are their plans in the medium terms, 6, 12, 18 months down the line? If you can establish yourself as a strategic partner, a partner who thinks beyond just the now problem, that's going to hold you in good stead when you're tendering, because they'll say, here's a supplier who wants to grow with us. How transparent are you in terms of your communication? Do you take accountability when things go wrong? Because we all know in business, 100% things go wrong. We accept that. Clients accept that. It's how you deal with it, how you put it right. And do you have what's called a problem-solving ethic? So can you sort things out in a way the client themselves perhaps haven't thought about it? The final point is about ensuring satisfaction of the internal customer. So like I said earlier, typically you'll be dealing with a procurement department, a team of evaluators who will be acting on behalf of the end client. So all those factors, if you can get your head around those, if you can understand them, if you can articulate them, it will put you in a much stronger position if your tender includes those sort of things. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's move on to what I call first things first. These are things that you might think are obvious, but there are certain things that you have to do to get over the first hurdle. You have to get this right, but it's not enough to win the tender. But if you slip up on any of these, what I would call administrative, perhaps simple things, you're not going to get to the second stage. And you're always looking of how do you get to the next stage when you're tendering. So the sort of paperwork you may find is there'll be a supplier questionnaire. It'll ask information about you, your company, your background, who the directors are perhaps, or how long it's been established. And again, follow it to the line, follow it exactly. Public sector organizations, there will typically be a form of tender which they'll ask you to sign. And what that's saying is that you've read everything within the paperwork and you agree with the terms and conditions. There may be what's called a non-collusion certificate that you need to sign as well. That's to confirm that you've completed your bid response independently. You haven't colluded with anyone else. They'll typically ask for some financial performance figures, some accounts. And yes, certainly with public sector organizations, there will sometimes be a minimum turnover threshold. So they may say they need to deal with companies over a certain size and threshold. But don't worry, if you don't meet that, but you have expertise, you can always join forces, and that's the way you can potentially get over that issue. They'll ask for references, typically 2 to 3 references. Again, excuse me, sounds obvious, but tell your referees in advance. Preferably give referees who you've done work for in a similar area to the one you're bidding for now. So it shows you've got expertise. You'll need to perhaps give them copies of certain policies. I talked about like social value, health and safety, and like everything, if you know what policies are required, get them in order now. Don't wait till you actually submit your tender. If you know you're going to be tendering a certain type of contract and that contract means you have to have 1, 2, 3 policies, then have them, get them in place, get them established. It's not as difficult as you might think. And there will also be typically a pricing file for you to complete in terms of obviously your costs. But all our competitors will be doing. And the final point, which I'll put in bold, which I'll touch upon in a moment, is plan. Plan carefully and allow enough time, because it does take quite a bit of time and effort to put these things together well. But if you're going to do it well. So as I said, all your competition, they'll be doing this as well. So it's really, how do you move on from there? Let's have a look. So here are just a few tips in terms of planning your response. Allow enough time, project manage it. So make sure you know who's doing what by when. I use sometimes, when I'm having to do these sort of things, a simple spreadsheet. All it needs is some targets, some goals, some milestones, some dates. Who's on your bidding team? Maybe it's just you if you're a one-man band. Okay, if you're a slightly larger organization, there may be internal stakeholders, internal staff who can help you. And the penultimate bullet point is key. Know the deadlines. This sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many councils have said they get calls 10 minutes before the deadline saying, we can't quite submit it. Can we have a bit of extra time? The bid response won't upload. Don't please leave it to the last minute. Work to a day before, and you'll always be safer that way rather than running out of time. And the final point, make sure if you're the person that spent some time writing the bid, someone other than you reads the response before it's sent, both for typos and technical things, just to make sure it reads and flows properly and you've answered the questions as thoroughly as you can. So the more planning you do, the better your response will be. Right, okay. Let's talk about some of the principal elements to submitting a winning bid. It's a combination, in my mind, of basically the right price. Like I say, it's the right price, not the cheapest price. So you need to know your market, you need to know your competitor pricing, you need to have a feel for the value you're adding so that you can charge the price you're charging and justify it. And a combination of that and what I've called these golden rules. So let's just run through some of the key elements. Again, some of these things might sound obvious, but you have to directly answer the questions. And it's, as I say, according to the evaluation criteria. Because if you don't answer it exactly the way it's been asked, you're going to score lower and you're going to be on the way to a losing bid. Sorry to be so blunt, but it's best to be honest. Do you have an understanding of the bigger picture? Like I said earlier, do you know what the strategic aims are? As I say, not just now, but maybe 6, 12, 18 months down the line. How do you demonstrate that your solution is credible? You can deliver it. It's competent. You've done it before, perhaps. You've got evidence. Have you confirmed the benefits? It's no good saying what you can do unless there's a benefit to the client. We've all heard, talk about benefits, not features, but that is a key thing, and a sort of an error sometimes companies do make. Excuse me. The talk about benefits, not features. And as I said earlier, saying all these great things is fine, but how do you back it up? How do you support and evidence it? Some of these things we'll look at in the second session. And finally, is your bid clearly, precisely, and what I call leanly written? So using less words, don't use too many words. So there are a number of factors that make up that winning bid. And what we're going to cover today is the first two areas. Okay, so just to be clear, these golden rules, they apply to any business. Doesn't matter what sector, what area you're in. So the generic but powerful rules, whatever sector you work in. So here's something that might sound obvious, but it's true. Excellent bids will usually win you a contract. So if it's well thought out, well prepared, well put together, you're going to be well down the road of winning that contract. And guess what the next slide is? Poor bids will usually actually lose. Because people checking your responses, they're evaluators. And what they do in simplest form is they read the questions and they basically mark them off against a set criteria of what they've asked. So make sure you include all parts. If you don't cover all parts of the question, and we'll do an exercise on that in a minute, you'll score more lowly. It might sound obvious, but you would be surprised how many bid responses are poorly prepared and written. So don't trip up on obvious, typical rules, errors. And here are some of the things that I've seen, certainly when I've looked at people's bid responses. The first one is like incomplete answers, or they haven't fully understood the question. The question could ask a number of parts, and you think, well, okay, I've answered the first two parts. That's okay. Let's move on to the next one. Or you've not quite interpreted it right. So read the questions carefully. The second one, we touched upon it, focusing on you and your business. You might have a great offer, a great service, but actually, if you focus on what you can do, rather than what it can do for the client, what value it can add, what benefit, how it improves something, you're going to trip up. So always focus on the customer. And that's why I keep saying putting himself in the client's mindset. Sorry, a couple more things. Features, not benefits, as I say. That's something you must never do. Don't talk about features, talk about the benefits. A lack of evidence. You can say how great you are, but can you back it up? Have you got case studies? Have you got client testimonials? Have you got Google reviews, LinkedIn recommendations? All well and good you saying how great you are, but if you've got a client of yours who says how great you are, then it's much, much, much more powerful. So everything you say should refer and relate back to your bid response. Think very carefully about what you're saying. We'll talk about evidence much more in the second session. So there's some of the fundamental rules and some of the areas where businesses often trip up. So the next fundamental question, and for you to get involved with, is why? Why should the customer choose you? What's your plan for submitting a great bid? What stands you out from the competition? So, exercise for you to have a go at. Have a little think about that for a moment and think, why should they choose your company as a supplier? And as I said a moment or so ago, how can you evidence you've got proven knowledge, experience, expertise in the service that is being required by the client. So, as it says, put yourself into the mind of the buyer, because the more you can write from their perspective, the more powerful your bid response will be. So I'm going to give you a minute for that. So please populate the chat. What stands you out as an organization? That's what's your USP. Why are you better? Are you cheaper? Are you more flexible? Do you have an experienced team? I'm just giving you some ideas. Put some stuff in the chat, please, and we'll then go through and have a little talk about some of the things that I've seen. So don't be shy. As I said, getting involved, you'll get more out of it. Just perhaps come up with one example why your company stands out. Because if you can't articulate that, then how are you going to get the client, how are you going to get the customer to understand why they should choose you? Okay, the chat screen is looking very bare at the moment. So I'll give you another 30 seconds if you want to pop something in there. If not, I'm going to move on and give you some of the answers. But do think about it, if not now, in your own time, because it's a key question. Why you? Why not your competition? Could be you've done a lot of work in the sector before. Someone's taken the bait. Thank you so much. Yeah, delivering solutions. If you're able to demonstrate presenting your case on time, demonstrating cost savings, yeah, that's great, Ramona. Thanks very much for that. It is key that you can actually deliver a solution. Sounds obvious, but that's critical. Okay, well, thanks for that. Let's move on. So here are some of the reasons, and these are generic, why a potential customer might want to choose you. Think about, first of all, how well do you know the client? Do you have an existing relationship? Have you built a relationship? Certainly with smaller organizations I talk to, they sometimes say with councils, oh, you know, they don't know anything about me. I'm too small. They've never heard of me. But, and we'll talk about this more in a few moments, what have you done practically to build a relationship? Have you got in touch with the key people? We'll talk about that more in a moment. Do you have evidence? One of the companies I worked with a few months ago, he had basically as a USP more 5-star Google reviews than any of his competition. So that's powerful, isn't it? That's a good reason to choose you. That's certainly a good starting point. So think about, do you have those case studies? Do you have testimonials? Have you got strong references? Where can they find this evidence? Is it easy to access? Have you worked on similar contracts? Can you demonstrate you've got expertise and experience in the sector? That's particularly important. I know for a fact when I was working in banking and we were trying to break into, you know, dealing with more local authority business, if you won one contract with a local authority, you can be certain they talk to other local authorities and they say, oh yeah, we're dealing with these people from XYZ bank and, you know, they're doing a great job, or they're doing this, they've improved this, that and the other. So can you demonstrate that you've done some work in a sector where you're now contracting for? Because that's really powerful. And can you actually demonstrate the value you added, the positive changes you made? And perhaps you've just got a very knowledgeable and experienced team. You know, what's the size? What's the level of the resource you bring to the contract? There are a number of reasons that if you can demonstrate some of these factors, put you again in a much stronger position to be chosen over and above the competition. Okay, but all your competitors will be claiming these things. So generic language is not quite enough. You've got to transfer that generic language into a more focused, value-driven narrative with evidence, because that's what will enable you to score more highly with evaluators. Because, you know, if you say good... moment. If you say good things about what you can do, that's well and good. You'll score something. If you can evidence it, if you can back it up, you'll be in a much, much, much stronger position. So again, I go back to this key golden rule about being clear about what you're being asked and the objectives. And that is critical to writing a winning bid. Again, that little diagram is supposed to be demonstrating putting yourself in the mind of your client. So you need to understand the objectives and needs of the client. And there's a hierarchy of understanding what's important to the client. What do they want to achieve, perhaps at an organizational or strategic level? What are the strategic issues for them? Do you understand that bigger picture? And how does a project relate back to that? There may be some absolute needs that you have to deliver as part of the project with some sub-needs, and I'll talk about that practically in a moment. And finally, what added value can you bring? So a simple example, I guess, you'd say, if, for example, a company were looking to source, a local authority were looking to source a catering company for a care homes, that might be their strategic objective. Appointing a catering company with some healthy options, that would be their absolute needs. It has to be done. That's the key focus of the project. And the added value things might be, I don't know, having vegan options, nutritional value, having the calories on sort of meals that are being prepared, well presented. So they're the things where you can differentiate. If you can show how you can add value over and above what they've asked, you'll be in a much, much stronger position, i.e., what have they not thought about? And that's exactly what a client asked me once when I was talking to him about a tender. It was a great question. He said, what is it we haven't thought about that you feel we should consider? And if you can bring that understanding together and identify those objectives and needs at each level and show how you add that value, you're going to be well on the way to submitting a winning bid. So where can you find out about the objectives and needs? Well, primarily, there are 4 ways. You'll get a pack of information in the ITT, that's invitation to tender. And it could often be quite comprehensive amount of documentation. I know when I was getting tender responses in my banking days, once you got an invitation in, it'd often be quite thick. I just set myself aside in a quiet room, put a cold towel metaphorically around my head, get a highlighter and go through and read it all in detail. There may be some additional information you had up front. Read all the spec carefully. You can ask questions, and you'll get answers. It's been harder to engage, excuse me. Harder to engage during COVID, but we're out of that now. But just remember, when you ask questions, the answers will be shared with all the suppliers. So make sure you've checked what questions have already been asked so that you don't ask the same question again and come across as having a low attention to detail. Do your research, as it says. You can carry out your own research. There are so many sources, and I will talk through some of them in a moment, in terms of where you can increase your knowledge of the client, of what they're looking for in a supplier, of what they're trying to achieve, their strategic objectives. And as the final point says, you can often clarify client requirements through the formal process. There's a number of ways you can find out. The more work you put in, the more you know, the stronger position you'll be in. Okay, so let's have a look at question analysis. Because like I said earlier, essentially, understanding and answering the questions correctly is key. You've got a team of evaluators, and all they're doing is with a grid, looking at their question. They've got a key to show, depending on what you've answered as part of the question, you get marked 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or whatever it might be. So make sure you understand the question fully. Think about how you will structure your answer and ensure you cover all elements of the question. Because if you only cover part of it, guess what? You're only going to get part marked, and therefore you'll have a lower score. Let's do a little exercise on that to demonstrate it. So this is a question from a real bid, okay? It's not made up. And the question is quite simple to you, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, how many elements, not elephants, must our answer address? So have a little read of that for a moment. And then what I'd like you to do is put in the chat how many elements of that question are there to answer. Anything from 1 to 10. I'll give you a minute for that while I take another sip of water. May think, well, there are 3 bullet points. There are three parts of the question. So, okay, that's your answer. Pop it in. Don't be shy, ladies and gentlemen. Put something in the chat. As I say, the more you get involved, the more you're going to learn and understand how these things work. The chat's a bit blank at the moment, but so I'll give you a starter for 10. I'll say, look, there are 3 bullets. So there are 3 elements of the question. If anyone wants to go higher or lower and give you a clue, it's higher. Thank you. Thank you for someone who again, is taking the bait on that. 6. Innie. Okay, great. Okay, that's a very good answer. Oh, 6 again. Oh, you've either seen the presentation before or you've done this before, but well, either way, you're both doing very well. So let's break that down. So you're absolutely right. There are 6 elements to that question. And you can see from the bits that have been highlighted in blue, the different parts of each question. So do read those questions carefully to make sure you understand and answer every element. You know, high-level description of the structure of the company. You might want to try and differentiate yourself by including a little organogram. You know, the third point is, you know, how many people are there in each team? Okay, the answer might be 4. But, you know, to go over and above, you might provide a 2 or 3 line bio, maybe even with a picture of the individuals within the team. That shows that people are real. It shows that you've gone over and above. How are you going to manage resource conflicts? There are lots of elements. And as I said, as long as you read it carefully and answer each element of the question, you'll be in a much, much stronger position to score highly. And that's always what the objective is, for you to get the highest score. All right, so here's an example of a grid that evaluators use. There's no hard and fast generic way of answering these, scoring these things, but essentially, if you score poorly, you haven't answered the question at all, you haven't provided enough information, you're going to be scoring lowly. And obviously what we're trying to do is get you to score 4s or 5s. And the definition of that is, you know, a well-defined solution. You've linked it clearly to the benefits. You've backed it up with evidence of how you've done this in the past. You've quantified the value you're going to add. You can measure it. If you can do that with your bid responses, you will be in a much, much stronger position. And sometimes what you'll also find is the scoring is weighted. And what I mean by that is it may be weighted more heavily towards pricing, for example. So you might have a 60-40 weighting pricing. So basically, if you've got 60% weighting on the pricing versus the solution, you know that they're looking for something that's a bit more cost effective, if you like. Whereas if they've only weighted 40% on the pricing, then what you've got there is they want you to, they're prepared to pay more for the right solution. So just keep that in mind as well, because sometimes they're not all 50-50 in terms of the weighting. Right, so that's a little bit about evaluation, how to score yourself more highly, and how the evaluators look at and score your responses. Let's now do another exercise on researching the client. There is a whole host of information out there for all larger organizations, whether they're private or public sector. But think about, first of all, what are the potential sources of information on a customer? And when you're doing that research, what sort of information are you looking for? So again, I'm going to give you a minute for that. So where can you find information about clients and what are you looking for? So again, if you could write that down in the chat, get your brains working and thinking. I'll then share some ideas from my side. I'll just give you a minute for that. Okay, we're off and running. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ini, yeah, company's mission statement. Absolutely right. Very good. Come on, people. Where else can we find? There's a huge number of sources out there. You know this. I mean, don't be shy in sharing it. And most of it is publicly available. So there's really no excuse other than time for not doing your research. Yeah, fantastic. Denise there, thanks for that. Yeah, previous contracts or projects, information from the company website, absolutely right. Previous contract projects are a really strong one. If you've done work with the client before, then make sure you look up what you said before, what you did before, who was involved in the project, are they still there? Do they know people within the company, that sort of thing. And that's very important. All right, I'll give you another 10 seconds if anyone wants to join on the chat. Ini, thank you. Denise, thank you. Yeah, company's house. Yeah, if they're an incorporated company, if they're a limited company, yep, you'll have information there as well. Very good. Okay, that's great. Thanks for your input on that. I shall move it along. So, yes, company's website for starters. That's a great starting point. So if you wanted to find out a bit more about Branduin, you could go on our website. It has little bios about what we all get up to. It gives, I guess, a view of what we feel is important as an organization and what we're working on. So I think, in terms of where you start, a company's website is always a good and, dare I say, fairly obvious starting point where you can get a lot of very useful information. Most organizations will be members of LinkedIn, I'm sure, and then you can have a look and see what sort of groups they're involved with, what's important to them, who they're following. All these things start to help you build a picture of the client and what they're looking at and what's important to them, both strategically, as I said, in the more long term, and what they're thinking about now. Social media, come on, guys. There's loads and loads of that out there, whether it's sort of Facebook or YouTube or, there's a whole host of social media sites where you can find out about what the company are up to and what's important to them and what they're following, what they're looking at. And with the council, for example, with Hammersmith and Fulham, they do make it easier for you. I say make it easier. The information is there. So there's some extracts there from their website, and it talks to you about what are they looking for in terms of suppliers when you want to trade with the council. Where can you find these tender opportunities? Where are they being advertised? They talk about social value in procurement. So that's basically, what are you as an organization giving back to the local community? Because that's one of the strategic drivers of this whole program for Hammersmith and Fulham. They want to empower more local companies, local businesses like yours to get a greater share of business, because they want you to benefit from the growth and the wealth being created within the council. So go onto their website at Hammersmith and Fulham and look up what they're doing. It tells you, what sort of things they're working on, what's strategically important. And if you know these things, you can mention it in your response. You don't have to go over the top, but you can talk about things that are important to them and as an organization. And that will give them, understanding correctly, the impression that you showed an interest. You've got over and above. You've done a bit of research. You understand what's important to them. What's driving them? And do you have any contacts in the council? Who are the key decision makers? We ran, and I'll talk a bit more, we ran a session a couple of weeks ago called Meet the Buyer. Some of you may have come there, and we had key people. This was a good old-fashioned face-to-face event. We had key people from the council. We had the head of the business team, the head of business economic development, we had the head of procurement. If you've met them, if you've had a chat, a conversation, sent them an email, started to form a relationship, again, puts you in a stronger position. So who are the key people that you need to know in the companies and organizations you're targeting? And again, that just gives you another extract from the council's website, which talks in great detail about what they look for in terms of suppliers and who to contact and what's sort of important to them when suppliers are looking to work with the council. So what are some of the potential sources in addition? Well, the key document clearly is the bid document, and that should lead our thought process in terms of what the organisation is looking for. I think, forgive me, one of the ladies, either Denise or Innie, you mentioned about internal resources and knowledge. Have you done some work for them before? Have you done some previous bids? What feedback did you get on those bids that you did previously? Because take that into account. There'll be the annual report and accounts, of course. That will give you a whole host of information. There are organisations like, Glassdoor, which allows companies to provide feedback on the company that they work for. You could set up Google Alerts, so you get alerts on certain things that you're looking for yourself. Attend events, conferences. The council, for example, they run various networking events. They run these Meet the Buyer events. There'll be like sector groups. There'll be government papers published, as someone I think said earlier. If it's a private sector company, you might get information from credit reference agencies. You can get information from competitor websites. So there really is a whole host of information sources out there. And yes, I accept it takes time and effort to source and look through those, but be selective and do your research, because there is a lot of useful information out there. And the more you know about your client, the better position you'll be in when you're bidding. And what are the sort of things to look for? Well, I've touched upon strategy. What's their short, medium, long-term strategy? What are their vision and values? Who's expressing what sort of opinions? What's the chief exec saying that's important for the organisation in the next sort of 3-6 months? What are their challenges at the moment? I mean, one of the key things with a lot of organisations now is getting the balance between working from home and getting employees to come into the office. So what's critical for their business? And what sort of language do they use? Because again, I was always taught in my banking days to use the same or similar sort of language that the supplier is using. Do they have a definition of a good supplier? And the council certainly do. And what is personally motivating people within the council, the senior key decision makers? So again, I keep hammering on about this, but the more you know about your prospects and clients in advance, excuse me, the better. Right, okay, so let me talk to you just briefly about some of the benefits and other things we've run under the program. Like I said, we run a couple of these bid writing sessions. This is the first introductory one. I'll be running something very similar. Well, not similar, moving on from this one next week, same time. We run sessions on basically how you develop and design your products for procurement, because I talked about you obviously often dealing with procurement departments. We have a LinkedIn specialist, that's the marketing to tier 1 suppliers, helping you to understand how best to use LinkedIn to grow your business. The circular economy in key partnerships is a very interesting one, because it's talking about how SMEs can meet global challenges. And you might think, oh, we're only small, you don't have to get involved in that. But in some small way, you do. There's a lot of talk about climate change, waste, plastic reduction, sustainability. In some small way, you need to be involved in that to demonstrate you have the right thought process. We ran a very successful event back on the 24th of January in Hammersmith and Fulham. We had about 70 businesses there. And it just, as I said, it gave local businesses the chance to meet key people within the council, have a chat, ask some questions. So again, make sure you get involved in these sort of events. Other than the face-to-face events, all these events are actually recorded. So if you need copies of recordings, we can give you access to our YouTube channel. And obviously, as I said, the final one that I'll be running live will be next week, same time, same place. Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about the one-to-ones, because this is a real, I think, a real important benefit of the program, because essentially you've got access to a specialist like myself who will work with you and your business to help you get better at bidding and tendering. And it can also look at sort of wider challenges of your business as well. I talked about value proposition and those types of things. I won't read it all out word for word. I'm sure you can all read it, but essentially it will help you get to a better position with bidding and tendering. And they're very, very structured sessions with agreed actions, with agreed follow-up. So it actually takes your business forward. It's not just a bit of a chat and then you go back to your day job and think, well, that was great, but I didn't actually change anything. There are some real tangible outcomes and tasks that we want you to take forward. And it's all about getting you, obviously, in a better state of preparedness to submit those winning bids, which, excuse me, with a little thought, a little planning, and a bit of time, it's not as difficult as it sounds. And just to show you that we and I follow my own advice, all well and good, me saying to you how great these sessions are and how wonderful SMEs find it. But actually, here are just 3 from a number of different testimonials we've had from SMEs who have done the one-to-one sessions. You don't need to read the whole lot, but essentially, the feedback generally has been extremely positive. And sometimes it's just having someone to keep you accountable, someone to signpost you. You might think, you know, I'd love to bid for contracts with the council, but I've got no idea where they advertise them. I've got no idea who to talk to in the council to start building that relationship. You know, it's a massive, massive organisation. And we can help you with so many different things, and they're very practical sessions. They're not going to be overly technical. We might signpost you towards people. We might help you by giving you access to webinars. We'll talk to you perhaps in terms of, you know, your business model, how you articulate value, how you build your brand, how you build your online reputation. Getting more case studies, testimonials will help you in terms of doing that. So you can see they seem to be, thankfully, very well received and very useful. So we literally have until the end of February before the program comes to its conclusion. It's been running for a year, since February 22. So please, if you haven't already had a one-to-one, then contact me. My details I'll share with you in a moment, and we can get something scheduled in the diary. They're all done by Zoom, as life tends to work that way, so you don't have to physically go anywhere, but they are very useful and valuable sessions. I would encourage any SME who's not had one to take advantage of it, because it's simply an investment of your time. It's all paid for and financed by the council, so take advantage of that. Right, well, we've just about come to an end now, so I hope you found that useful. Like I said at the outset, please do something as a result of what you've heard today. And if you're able to share that in the chat, what you're going to do, that will be great. If you could also share any feedback on how you found this session, that would also be great. So I think we're literally a couple of minutes to 12, so we're just about on time. So I'll leave the chat open for 2 or 3 minutes. Please let me know what you thought about the session. I hope you found it useful. And also, as I said, if you're able to share with the group, what's that one thing you're going to do as a result of spending an hour out of your busy schedules to listen to me, then that would be great. And it doesn't have to be something particularly, you know, strategic. It might just be, you know, look at the webinar again and make some notes as to what I need to focus on in terms of my own business. So I'll leave the chat open for a couple of minutes. Please do give me your feedback, and I'll hang around here for a couple of 2 or 3 minutes, and happy to take any questions that you might have as well. And thank you for your time, and thank you for listening. Thanks, Nice. Yep, yeah, do contact me for a one-to-one, Anusha, that's for sure. Yep, I'm ready and waiting for your calls. Thanks, Cameron. I'm glad you found it useful. Thanks, Naz, for popping my details in the chat as well. I'll also put my that's my phone number is oh, hang on. That's also my phone number if anyone wants to give me a call or follow up on an email. So yeah, very, very happy to sort of get those one-to-ones set up as quickly as we can, because time is against us, unfortunately, but I'm ready to help. Oh, good. I'm glad people found it useful, because that's always a bonus. We try and keep these things as practical as we can. Hopefully we'll see all of you again next week, this same place, same time on Zoom. And yeah, if you've got any questions, you have my email, and I'll be very happy to help. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day. All the best. Bye-bye.